before, I'm Phil Schneider. I'm an ex-government worker who worked 17 years in the Black Projects, otherwise known as the Skunk Works. I worked predominantly helping to design and build extremely deep underground military basing. Thank you. Appreciate that. Give you a short overview of my background. I'm a structural engineer, both aerospace as well as military applications. Graduate of University of Missouri as well as University of Manchester, England. That's about it for me. I worked in Vietnam, got torn to pieces, shot, whatever. Took 5 years to recuperate, came back, patched me up, so to speak. Went to work for Morrison Knudsen. And from Morrison Knudsen, I worked also with EG&G, Bechtel, Aerospatiale of France. Also worked with Fiat for a while, cars by Fiat. I did a lot of work overseas, but predominantly my field was underground mountain basing, also submarine basing. I wrote several treatises on analyzing rock formations by grain structure, and this grain structure would yield a certain pattern. And that certain pattern could be used to analyze and chemically analyze and make special explosives that could be used to blast out large caverns underground. And even when there were caverns, you could still use shape charges to blast inert rock, although a lot of it was done by laser tunneling and drilling. I have a copy of a book here. I can't sell it. It's my only copy. But this fellow can corroborate with me. His name is Richard Souter, PhD. He can corroborate with me in regards to everything I'm talking about.
Who is it by?
Richard Souter, PhD.
Here's another man that
Okay, we need
couldn't find the room. You need to give him your ticket.
I will.
And all that.
I guess I'll let you know that kind of the background of my father. My father was a German U-boat captain, responsible for the sinking of 141 Allied boats. And he got captured by the French, then turned over to Third Army, U.S., and then Third Army turned him over to Naval Intelligence, based out of Pensacola, Florida at the time. He later went to work also in Navy Black Projects. Maybe that's where I started, but it just worked out that way, I guess. Anyway, he worked for naval operations. He worked on the infamous Philadelphia experiment. He was involved heavily with that. In fact, I have some of his original notes. Get it here. Wait a second here. I thought I included them, but I guess I didn't. Strange, they were right here too. Oh, here they are. These are some of the original notes that he had to go to school to learn them at Berkeley. And they were discussing things like element 104, 105 way back in 1950, so obviously that school was a little more accelerated than schools normally of that particular day, both in atomic physics and also in time variancy. Anyway, my father continued to work in the U.S. Navy up until a couple of years before he died. He died 2 years ago, 1993, May of 93. But his main contribution, other than the Philadelphia experiment, was that he was one of the principal engineers of the first nuclear submarine, the USS Nautilus. And he worked with Hyman Rickover on that project to its fullest from start to finish. He helped design the nuclear reactor, he helped design the metals, the containment vessel. He did all the machining of the uranium pellets that were used. He designed the hull predominantly and some of the graving docks, so he was a major contributor as such. Such today that even his ideas in air conditioning and filtration are still used today in all nuclear submarines in the United States. So, that's so much for my father. He taught me a lot. He's a pretty silent fellow over time. He told me that I shouldn't work in black projects in the desert regions. Of course, I told him, I'm sorry, I have to work for a living. And in the early 60s, mid-60s, construction work didn't pay really tremendously. And that's where I got to start. One thing led to another. And when I went over to Vietnam, I got 10 times what a normal construction worker would get. But then the risk was pretty great too. And when I got hurt and recuperated some 5 years later, I got hurt in 1970, and by 1975 I was bouncing around again. And so at that time I went to work for a number of contractors who were primarily underground base builders. And of course, I might give you a brief overview. The first underground bases were basically old gold mines. Just the tunnels were already there. The first missile base, as a matter of fact, I believe it was in northern Montana. It was an old gold and silver mine. And the missiles are still in the old air shafts. The air shafts are re-drilled out and everything. They made a semi-hardened missile base out of an old gold mine, which is kind of unique, seeing laser. Well, first, basically, the main part of the talk will deal with what I faced underground. Is there anybody here that is in the frame of mind that they can't take gore or that kind of thing? If there is, there might be a problem because I'm going to get rather graphic.
I don't like it, but I can say that.
Okay, I'll tone it down a bit. This workshop basically is everything that I missed in the main talk yesterday, and of course it's pretty hard to cram 3.5 or 4 hours talk in 50 minutes. I divided a talk into three topics. I'm going to talk about dumb bases, deep underground military bases, call them dumb bases. Right now there are 131 of them, 129 are fully operational. Each one averages about 4¼ cubic miles hollowed out underground at an average depth of 5,000 feet down. Now, of course, some of them are shallower, some of them are deeper. They're strategically located. They were initially built to protect the President of the United States and the government in general, federal government as well as the political government. Somehow the sheer number of the 129 bases with basically the size of a medium-sized U.S. city is kind of unfathoming when you're dealing with maybe only 10,000 people in government that would be saved during a nuclear holocaust or war. So obviously these bases have other ulterior means. Some of them have already been used to in-house alien beings. Our government chooses not to let this out to the public for two reasons. The first main reason is that they don't want to panic the public. And their second main reason is that they don't want the public to know the alien agenda. My first part of my talk will be talking predominantly about the alien agenda and what it means for us on planet Earth. And it's going to get pretty graphic. The alien agenda basically is thusly. Aliens of 11 distinct races have been arriving here on Earth in mass since 1946, predominantly, and maybe earlier. Actually, probably the Bikini Island was one humongous underwater UFO base, basically flying disc base, and that was known in the early 1940. I think it was March of 1940 it was known that there was a number of this activity at that time. The Japanese, before we got into war with them, they had a number of problems with flying balls of light, as they called them, or divine second wind, as they also called them. They thought they were godlike. However, the gods don't come down and murder the populace, so their idea of such ended rather abruptly. They became rather frightened after they declared war with us, hoping that if they lost the war, and this is strictly skeptical at this point in time because I've heard this from only 3 different sources within the U.S. Navy, that if we captured enough territory, maybe we could lick them, and that would solve their problem. But although that's pretty skeptical, can't prove that one way or not. The alien agenda basically is the takeover of planet Earth by another race of beings, or races of beings. The U.S. government has known about this alien agenda at least since early Hitlerian times, probably as early as 1933. The reason for that is the Third Army, under Patton and others, just afterwards had allured that there was some other agenda other than World War II that was an immediate threat to the people of this planet. In fact, General Douglas MacArthur was one time quoted as saying the very next war, and this is toward the close of World War II in 1945, he actually was quoted as saying, the next war we have will be not from people of Earth, but it will be from people. The World War, talking about, or worse, will be from races from the stars. And of course, this spawned a lot of speculative science fiction writing and that kind of thing like that. It was always, from then on, he was kind of looked at as a doddering old fool. He was a very visionary man, saying the least. If anything, he knew about the alien agenda in World War I times. Let me go further back in history. The first UFOs seen and occupants seen in caves and in and around Truth and Consequences, New Mexico, were spotted by U.S. Army cavalry in 1909. So this is a little earlier than most people had thought. Supposedly U.S. cavalry had come across they were chasing some bandits, and they chased them in this area, and there was these caves, and they were rather highly infested with aliens and what they call the silver wing. They didn't know what like. All that was around were very primitive aircraft, and of course there was balloons, and that was about it. 1909 was pretty far back in time. Anyway, the alien agenda means, as far as anything goes. As far as the government is concerned, it is the worst scenario they could ever face, because it involves not only having to tell the public major lies and innuendo all the time, but and keeping the public out of their face. Slowly it's breaking down, and I'm helping do that because I remember my forefather of this country, George Washington, one time saying, "An uninformed populace is a populace devoted to slavery." And so one must consider that if we become uninformed and we ourselves have to take up battle against this kind of a scourge, if we're uninformed, then we're defeated already. So I'm not here to panic anybody or start a panic, but I feel that by lying to the American public, this is not the American way. And we need to do something about that. As a matter of fact, as I'm talking, we need to also be talking and doing our homework regarding that. And there's a lot of people say, well, I don't have the time. You can take 20 minutes a day, can't you? And we can go from there. You'd be surprised what word of mouth does after you found out one little truth, another, and pretty soon it becomes a snowball. But back to the alien agenda. Throughout the almost half of the deep underground military bases in the United States, the 62 of them, of the 131, actually the 129, they're fully operational. The other two are under construction. 62 of these bases are housing both the tall gray as well as the short gray alien, and all of their craft, and of course our government, especially the U.S. Air Force and U.S. Navy predominantly, are trying to break this their technology down into usable technology for our own self. Case in point is this particular scenario. The F-117A, the B-2 bomber, maybe the Aurora, although that's not an accurate rendition of what it looks like. The airframes are predominantly made of alien metals beyond element 109, and metal composites, some of the skins of which are composed of rubber and carbon fiber, and the airframes are composed of complex carbon fibers mixed with elements such as mironite, which is element 123, which is extremely stable. I just kind of slapped this together. It's not quite as professionally done as these, but this was in Saudi Arabia. At that time they had 58 of these. This was half the fleet. And I'll give you a few statistics that these aircraft do. First of all, it's got a radar absorbing material. That's the coal black coating. It's a type of a, in a while I'll get out some alien artifacts for you, some metals and some of the doping or painting that drips off of this when the aircraft is heated up to a white hot condition. And anyway, these are specially hangared. They have to be kept cool. They have to be kept at a temperature of 60 degrees roughly when they're not moving. There's faceting on the edges. The faceting is a scalenohedral crystalline form. It's a crystalline form that predominantly does not occur on planet Earth, and is an alien. It's once again alien technology that has been adapted to Earth-type or terrestrial-type technology. These ideas were first thought of in Soviet Russia, and later they were adapted. They couldn't use that particular kind of thing in the early 70s, and so one of their scientists defected, came over here and started to work immediately with Lockheed. His name was Subakov, I believe is his name. Anatoly Subakov, Alexei Subakov. This fellow was also a pioneer and such. His name was Paul Benowitz. He was going to go public with the UFO and the alien agenda thing. He was a CIA pilot. He was also with the U.S. Air Force. Of course, they couldn't let that happen, and so they stuffed him in the trunk of a car one night, took him off to a mental institution, and made him into a mental vegetable. He can't even write his own name today. If it wasn't for a brother who spent $1 million and a sister looking for him, he'd probably still been rotting away in some institution somewhere. Okay. What we've got here, like I mentioned, is basic alien technology. It was adapted for us. Paul Benowitz, once again, he developed the shape of this aircraft, as well as how the bombs were to be dropped. He was also into other projects through Los Alamos. This is in Saudi Arabia, and I'll tell you a few statistics about this during the Gulf War.
Would you like to borrow this?
Sure. Thank you. During the Gulf War, this particular aircraft had 4 large bombs underneath. They were called smart bombs, cruise missiles, and also rockets and machine gun fire, Vulcan cannon style, but even more advanced than that. I don't really know quite about that. There was one pilot that sat in here. He literally had to be crammed in, actually right up in here. They had to literally wedge him in there, and took a certain weight and size of individual in this aircraft. And all the Computronics is made by Mitsubishi Computronics and Heavy Electric Industries. The jets were both turbine as well as nuclear powered for extremely high flight. By the way, the smart bombs that were used in the Gulf War, 58 aircraft ran 3,706 sorties or missions. 100% of the bombs hit the target. 100% of the rockets hit the target. Shot up, completely destroyed the Iraqi air defense systems. It was a 100% system. Only one aircraft suffered one small hit, or actually where a missile just barely missed it, and it just chipped out part of that, but the aircraft was able to make it home. It was a minor repair. The aircraft's back in service. But anyway, now there's some 179 of these built. They're building about one every other month, thereabouut. They're a $208 million aircraft, while this one here is about a $188 million aircraft, and it's fraught with problems. Although recently, the F-117A, Black Jet as they're known as, originally housed at Nellis Air Force Base, Tonopah Test Range, S4, Groom Lake, you name it. These aircraft employed a 3-dimensional radar. Everybody else's radar was 2-dimensional. The Black Jets employed a 3-dimensional radar, which is far superior. And Computronics too also had a Cray system to analyze bombing targets, and it was also the first aircraft where the pilot wore a helmet. It's called psychoenergetic range finding. It's a copy from the Russian technology, Soviet-Russian technology, where a pilot can think in his own language and arm his weapons and pick his target from his computer. It's still employed in a second and third generation. It's extremely accurate. It cannot be faked. In other words, if another pilot decides to commit sabotage and jump in the cockpit, the plane plane won't even begin to run, let alone any of the missiles firing or anything else. So it's kind of a unique system. It's kind of like the signature gun, and of course we've heard about those in different movies and whatnot. Now we have the Aurora, which is a trans-atmospheric vehicle, and the Aurora, there's 4 of them currently being tested. I know that's been refuted too by a couple of local gun shows before my lecture. He says, well, the Aurora doesn't exist, Bill, you know that. I said, well, really? I says, well, I guess you don't think this exists either. And that was a picture, that was this map. He said, no, that doesn't exist either. And I said, really? Interesting. I suggest you have a seat and learn something.
But they have one surpassing the Aurora now.
Yes, there are 2 other prototypes that are small space shuttles capable of speeds in excess of 40,000 miles an hour. And plus, we also employ 29 prototypes of flying saucer and are successful in piloting those at up to 90,000 miles an hour in the atmosphere without burning up. That's doing something, because when you push, you go beyond Mach 3, actually beyond Mach 2.7, you ionize the air around it, and you cause the elements of the air to actually catch fire, and you need a force field around that system to exceed Mach 3 or Mach 4 without burning up, because you'll be as hot as a glowing meteorite coming in at about 30 or 40,000 degrees. Anyway, the Aurora, there's 4 of them flying. They fly day and night. They have 12 people in it as a crew. They can have a skeleton crew of as few as 6. They can basically leave Tonopah Test Range at 7 o'clock in the morning, do a complete loop around Russia and China, take all the pictures. They're predominantly a spy plane. They can take pictures, come back for lunch. That's how rapid it is. They attain from basically zero. Once again, this aircraft, and this aircraft are anti-lifting bodies. They're not conventional winged aircraft. A flying saucer theoretically is a circular wing. These are not. These are anti-lifting bodies. In other words, it takes an incredible amount of speed before they're able to take off. This is all, once again, this is all part of the one world government type system. I try to stay away from the political end, but it's kind of like the one world government system. Take over the planet, and hopefully we don't have to tell the people of the planet what the alien agenda is. The alien agenda is was probably never meant, the aliens never meant that we were going to alter the bargain, but the aliens were the ones back in 1954 who cut a treaty with us saying that, well, we'll give you a list of the people that we implant and the cattle we mutilate, and we'll give you the reason why and everything. Of course, that never happened. And they kept altering the bargain until finally, in 1979, in Dulce, New Mexico, I was involved in that operation. We had gone down there to build an auxiliary base in the southern end of Dulce, New Mexico, already existing base on Archuleta Mesa. And lo and behold, when we drilled down, we found aliens were already in there, and have been in there for some time. I can tell you, when you're standing, say, as I am here, to where this gentleman is over here, and that's an alien gray who's pretty much 7 feet tall, and the meanest looking bastard you ever saw, and not looking like a human being, you kind of get petrified. And as an engineer, of course, I didn't carry a regular big clunky 45 or anything built, because it would get in the way. I carried tools and other kinds of things on my belt, and I always carried a small pistol, Walther PPK with a 9-shot clip, 380. And I emptied one clip into 2 of these alien critters, as I call them. And yes, they are mortal, but I got also, as soon as that happened, as I was reloading, I never got the clip into the gun. they hit me in the chest with some kind of particle beam weapon that gave me a very high dose of nuclear radiation, similar to cobalt radiation, but not quite, even more nasty. And I was in isolation afterwards for 50 some odd days, 57 days all total. And it took another couple of years to recuperate. Once again, I was my body was in a traumatic situation. But here I am talking, so it looks like here we go again. But I've got the scars to prove it.
I can verify that they are there.
So they're there. It's pretty
They
gross.
are there.
It's pretty gross, and I don't want to. There are ladies. There's a ladies present here. So let's not raise the shirt here. But they're there. And basically, in talking about alien agenda, we have to also be talking about what occurred over here. This is the Bikini Atoll test. Now here we have an actual extremely large, in quote, mothership right at the point of neutron flash cloud. That's like 2 or 3 10,000ths of a second after the initial blast. And of course, the date of this was 12 July 1946. As we all remember, if we read our history on UFOs and how they started, it wasn't really known. As a matter of fact, after Roswell, we remember that there was a Senate hearing and a House of Representatives hearing, a closed-door session hearing, but a little bit leaked out in the public, and it stated that the government knew nothing about UFOs prior to that time. And these pictures, these different pictures with UFOs actually in the pictures, actually with the original language, show that, I'm sorry about that, actually show that the government lied to the Congress of the United States. They knew full well what was going on at least a year prior. Of course, I believe the Roswell incident was 2nd of July of 1947. This occurred, of course, 2nd of July. I think the earliest A-bomb blast, 12th July, 12 July 1946, almost a full year before they were supposed to know anything. And here we have these streaks, and these are the classic discs that have all been pictured like this. Look like the Top Hat series, as I call it. And of course, they're kind of coal black kind of thing. Of course, some of them have a radiant, have atomic propulsion systems underneath it. Those streaks have all been confirmed as being just that. They're a Type 3A flying disc. And we have these small white dots. White dots. By the way, these guys here are receding from the ocean, taking the trajectory. They're getting out of there in the worst way. They'll probably not make it because of the radiation factor. But they're exceeding at speeds in excess of 13,000 miles an hour. And the white dots are exceeding 30,000 miles an hour as they're leaving. And they have actually changed the color. They've almost gone out of scope. And you're seeing a photograph, very rapid photograph of a blurred image. Some of the photographs go from a black splash or dash to this white dot system, and then they go out of scope of what we call visual reality. And that takes some tremendous speed to do that. In this particular overview shot, which is an extremely rare photograph of an atomic blast, as far as I know, this is the only one ever shown to the public of an overview of any kind. There are small dots and dashes, basically, as I'd say, and these are old garbage scows and ships and whatnot that they put in harm's way to see what the reaction would be of an atomic blast. And I'm sure the atomic testing was conducted predominantly in case we had to be prepared in using atomic warfare to fight alien influence, and they needed a cover story, so this was the Russians and the Cold War and everything was just a perfect cover story. Although it later became more than a cover story, as we all know. These particular photographs also show small dots and dashes, as I would say, and all of them have been confirmed. Now this black system here in the atomic cloud is actually time being ripped up, of course the atmosphere and the clouds and everything, and then time being warped by the initial blast itself, and that's by neutrinos going through and ionizing space, ionizing the atmosphere and whatnot, but exceeding the speed of light, so you produce an antimatter background and you get total blackness. And of course here we have another UFO similar to these here. But once again, we haven't been told the truth on any of this. We've been right here, also in this picture, in the bombing of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. This is of Nagasaki. Down at the bottom, we see the characteristic human face, which is typical of all A-bomb explosions over populated areas. You will always find a human face at the bottom of the mushroom cloud. Now, nobody really knows if this is just by coincidence or the makeup of the cloud or whatever. But these little dots and dashes, these white dots and dashes, are receding at better than 30,000 miles per hour, and they're UFOs leaving the scene. Japan was infested with them. Their Navy had counted better part of 2 million of them toward the closing end of World War II. Once again, it's all part of an alien attack of planet Earth. It's been going on steadily since World War II era. It's still going on, only now is subverted into large groups of human beings being actually abducted and implanted, and that's according to the Roper report, which is part of the Remington Rand Corporation, who did the reporting, the Bigelow Holding Company. Now they're in a third generation report, and of that third generation report that was sent out to all the clinical psychologists in the United States, 110,000 of them, stated that basically women are being raped by aliens. And I know as fantastic as that sounds, it's backed up by John Mack, Harold Wire, who's an MD as well as a clinical person. John Mack is the most famous, but there's some 90 concerned psychiatric scientists who are trying to form an organization to prevent secrecy on the subject, because they have mentioned this is nothing but government-sponsored rape. 99.3% are women, 0.7 or 0.7% are men that are abducted, implanted. So it's predominantly a female type monitoring system. So once again, the alien agenda is to disturb the natural progress of the human race, and to alien agenda means. And of course, there's another thing to mention: any outer space alien, regardless of who they are, how benevolent or how evil they are, they're a biological hazard, because we have no defense against their germs. Absolutely none. In fact, they can kill us just by being around. I developed something like jungle rot. I still got it on my feet and on my back, and because of the Dulce, New Mexico thing, I get free hospitalization for the rest of my life. I think I'm a good guinea pig, I guess. But theoretically, that's from being around inside that cave at that particular time. That's the first time I've told any of you people that, but that's basically what it's all about. Well, we've talked about the dumb bases and the black projects predominantly, and the alien agenda. I would like to stick to another subject. It's called Strategic Defense Initiative. Of course, this could very easily be, as mentioned by my late friend Ronald E. Rummel, who was murdered, incidentally, by the 3 people conspired to kill him. One person did the killing. One was a NSA officer, and one was an alcohol, tobacco, and firearms officer. Both are in custody as we speak. The third gentleman is fighting extradition. He's in Czechoslovakia. Most likely able to successfully fight extradition because they don't follow the U.S. law very well. Anyway, the Strategic Defense Initiative is probably, instead of preventing incoming missiles, although they're now that most nations and favored and otherwise have nuclear missile technology, is probably some form of outer space defense against outer space attack, and it's pretty primitive indeed, but it's better than nothing. And the second part of my talk will be aliens and the alien agenda. I've already touched on that. Old alien bases. And like I said, Bikini Island, according to what was studied after the A-bomb blast, that some of the caves that were infested with out-of-place artifacts dealing with UFOs and other kinds of paraphernalia had rock forming around them, so they had been basically an alien junkyard in shallow seas for probably the better part of 10,000 years. So they've been around. That you might call an old alien base. Dulce, New Mexico is another old alien base, or kind of a botryoidal or clear agate had formed over some of the parts laying on the floor of the existing base, and it takes an extremely long period of time, for geologically speaking, for this to form. The aliens have probably been here the better part of at least 500,000 and maybe as much as several million years, although I have artifacts here which show artifacts that like a small turbine-looking device sitting in 220 million year old fossil coral, and I also have alien metals which are present in other kinds of rock formations, including a piece of petrified wood where an insect had basically burrowed a hole around one of its limbs, and then something had literally, like a laser, had literally sliced through it, but the cambium or the actual layers of the wood had bent as the beam burnt its way through it. I've got that in here too, as well as an original piece of instantly petrified, looks like a garlic root that was found in and around Area 51. And this particular piece of garlic type plant was instantly petrified. It contains the same exact chemical structure of the quartz crystal, and the quartz crystal only grows in a certain left-handed crystal pattern, and that same pattern is extant on fossil, instantly petrified or fossilized plant life of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. It's identical, chemically identical. So, anyway, the next part of this, the second part of the talk, are treaties. Basically, there were 4 distinct treaties made through the United States government from the alien encounter. The first one was in 1944. The second one was 1954. The third one was 1962. And the fourth one was 1979. I'll go backwards. The 1979 treaty was a total violation of incidentally in Dulce, New Mexico, where I got badly hurt. 66 Secret Service and Delta Force people lost their lives, 22 of which were on loan from other countries, Israel, Germany, Norway, and South Africa, if I remember. I was the only geological engineer down there to analyze the situation. The government almost basically lied to us. They kind of said that alien presence might be there, but they didn't tell us that they knew that there was an alien base and that they'd already attempted to make contact. And of course, this was disturbing indeed. In fact, a couple of the engineers who managed to survive put the project under duress. Another part of the talk are the intelligence community. The Nazi group, the World War II Nazi or Hitlerian group, the Fatherland Intelligence Agency, trained our CIA, our OSS, which became our CIA, and other intelligence communities predominantly, and are still being employed today as we, in quote, the federal government today trains Bosnian troops on American soil, and from what I understand, that's totally illegal, and that's another topic. Now, the third part of the talk is the types of aliens. The large gray two large grays that I shot and killed, I can't tell you how ugly they were, and I can never tell you how graphic the stench was. But in the cave there were large cauldrons or tanks. They kind of looked like a big oval cattle feeding tank, but they weren't. They were special, looked like a stainless steel or metallic tank. And they were filled with alien and human body parts, and generally glands and what looked like some kind of blood. Now, I've always been taught that blood after a few minutes starts to congeal, but this was one of these vessels that in the melee had tipped over and all this bloody liquid had spilled out. It was a mess, and it was definitely not coagulated. How they did this is anybody's guess. If we remember anything about cattle mutilations, we might also think that basically the blood in these cattle are totally drained out. There's no blood around, in quote, the murder scene of the cattle. So this might be the way they're doing it. Now, whether this is sponsored by our government or other governments is a good guess. If it were up to me, I'd say yes, we're in the thick of it. We made a pact with the aliens, and therefore we must know what their agenda is, and also the federal government must also further know that if they keep the big lie going, they must be in the thick of it in the worst way, and if that's the case, they're an enemy of gross concern.
Who is we, would you say?
We, in quote, the federal government.
The Department of State?
Department of State, Department of the Air Force, Navy, Army, Marine Corps, basic force services, plus the military policing facilities, and the FBI and all that different. They're all hooked into the black projects as a whole. In this part of the black projects, there's kind of like an outer sphere of normal black projects, like building everything from these kind of aircraft here, and doing these kind of experiments here, to building aircraft like this, places like this. And that's kind of on the outside. On the inside of this circle, we get a tighter group of people who really know what the main agenda is, maybe even the enslavement of the human race as a remnant, or something as a scenario like that, and then finally a third category whereby, whereby none of the other two categories would even hint at the possibility or the horror of what's happening. And it's a very compartmentalized system. I can only begin to guess, even though that I've been in the thick of things from the outer core to the second core level, but I have no idea what's in the third core level. No way at all. And because it's so complicated, I've heard some of this run by me, and it's so fantastic, it makes a Star Wars or a movie or a Star Trek novel, or a Babylon 5 novel look like a kid's toy. I mean, it's too fantastic for me to believe, so I can assume that it might be an otherworldly plan or scenario for taking over the planet, but once again, I can't prove it, so I don't talk about it. Right here, only basically to discuss basically what I know of the alien agenda and through deep underground military bases and the application that I did during this kind of activity for the U.S. government. I'll have a question and answer period in a short time. I've already talked about old firefights. I will tell you right now, I'm breaking major federal law. I'm breaking my entire security oath system. The security oaths, in fact, here's a copy of my 1985 security clearance. You might zoom in on that if you care to. Can you do that?
Yeah.
Tell me when. Okay. And of course it's got a picture of me, it's got Department of the Air Force, it's got a control number here, it's got a digital control number and name here, it's got a UPC stripe here, it's got a level L. That was only issued to people that worked at Groom Lake and Area S4. And R, restricted zone R4808E. This is a computer chip camera in the card itself. You didn't wear the card like you wore another security card. This one wasn't worn. This was used to get you into the main gate. And there's a large machine. I can't draw it. There was a large machine that looked like a kind of like a curved. The bottom part, you put the card in, and you put your thumbprint on. You're supposed to actually, some of them had two of them. I don't have a second thumb, so this one was made with one. There's normally two here, and the L for a normal person would be up through the UPC stripe. So there was one, and I put my thumb there on the bottom, and if it would flash green, I'd flick a switch, and then I'd insert the card in the second part of the control unit, and there would be a thing that would hold my forehead, and I could block off my left eye, and I'd stick this thing up to my right eye and take a picture of my retina, and then if the green light went off, I could remove my card and I could leave it at the guard shack, and I'd wait for anywhere from 45 minutes to several hours waiting for the next shift to start. I'm breaking all my security oaths by coming out in the open and talking about this, because not only are we dealing with a kind of technology, I believe, that we should be out, that should be out in the public. It should, at least this kind of 50 and 60-year-old material should be out in the public. I feel that in coming clean, so to speak, I don't know quite how to explain it other than the fact that when I initially was told these underground bases were for security in case of nuclear attack of the United States, and it was a total lie. When I found out that aliens were actually entrenched in half of these bases, and these bases, by the way, cost a minimum of $17 billion apiece. The black budget garners $508 billion a year, $1.023 trillion every 2 years. That's 2-year-old information. It's probably more like 1.3 trillion now. When which is about 1/4 of the gross national product of the United States. It's no wonder why our economy is kind of up and down here and there. Once again, you might ask, well, how in the heck? We've only been told, we the public have only been told there's a total defense budget of $447 billion, so how can there be $500 billion going on behind the scenes? First of all, black budget means hidden budget. Hidden budget is totally hidden from congressional view and oversight, cannot be audited by the U.S. Treasury system at all. It is a separate, independent taxing body entity within the federal government structure, which, by the way, is illegal. Totally illegal. It's primarily financed by drug operations by the CIA and the NSA and the Drug Enforcement Administration, and now the FBI is implicated also. Recently there was an FBI man who came out of the cold, so to speak, and told all, only to find himself murdered, and he took a vacation in England, he got himself murdered. That was in the paper about 3 years ago. Anyway, 9 attempts on my life have been taken, all since the 1st of January of this year. Well, I've been shot at, been run off the road. 3 times I've been run off the road, one of which is I'm a very good driver. I used to race cars for somewhat of a hobby type living. I used to race everything from Formula 1 on down, motorcycles and stuff like that when I was a kid, so I lived kind of on the edge all the time. So I became a very good driver, a very defensive driver, and so if somebody's trying to run me off the road, like before my Vegas talk, I dropped a friend of mine off at 29 Palms area and saw another friend in the Marine Corps hospital who was dying of cancer. And on the way out of there, you have to skirt around a whole mountain range. You just can't take the easiest way in a straight line out. It'd be nice, but it doesn't work that way. You have to skirt around these mountains. And, I had a Ford Taurus with a Police Interceptor motor, and roughly an 8-liter motor. It's a real monster. And there were 2 long Ford E350 vans, and they all had Air Force markings on them. They all had guns, and they were all shooting, and they were missing. And I flew by them and took a picture of their, as a blur, I took a picture of them, got a very good picture of their license plates. And then they sped up and tried to squeeze me in this way, and then finally I just slid right in the middle of the road, and the road was wide enough for basically one-way traffic. And one of them rolled over and kept going down for about 300 or 400 feet down a very steep ravine. The other one was a shallow ravine about 10 feet deep. And I just kind of peered over, got the hook of my seatbelt and peered over, and there was a big fire started on down there. I could hear people screaming, but I'm sorry, it's their deal. I just kept on going. That was one way. Recently I got shot at when I was with a retired FBI agent. We were going to go to a Patriot talk show down near Salem, Oregon. And I got shot here, here, and here. It's what's called a CIA cocktail. I don't have normal ribs after Dulce, New Mexico fiasco, where my ribs were burnt, cauterized, my fingers are burnt off of me, etc. I have a plastic plate in here, a nylon plate that has bumps on it, looks like ribs and everything. So those bullets just kind of lodged in this thick, 5/8" thick plastic, movable plastic thing on the inside, and that was dug out. And once again, here I am recuperating from another problem, and all because I'm trying to bring the American public and I love my country more than my life, otherwise I wouldn't be doing this ridiculous group of things by coming clean, but I feel I have to because the American public has not only been lied to, but when I was asked to by the intelligence community within the Air Force to continue my operations and black budget work, stealthy work, what would I think if they said that I would be betraying the American public? I told them to go fly it, go stuff it or whatever. I says I won't be a party to that. And I walked out of the room. And somebody tried to tell me to come back, and I says, out of my face, fella, you're on the ground. He would get out of my face and went on the ground. And I walked away, and went on and made a decision. And I'll stick by it. And that's why I'm here talking. I also want to get a little political sided here, although I don't like to. Right now we have an out-of-touch, runaway federal government structure that really doesn't care about the way you and I feel. They manipulate evidences of crimes, as in several instances, both in Waco and other. The Waco hearings should have been a wake-up call to most who were watching, even if they'd only watched a piece of it. It's once again proves the federal government structure is just running away with everybody's freedom, and they run roughshod over. They've actually become kings and queens over us, and our forefathers told us exactly what would happen if we took a certain stand, if we made laws to legislate God out of our system. We would have a similar problem. If we made laws or had too many people making laws within our government structure, we would have a similar problem that we're facing today. We're facing a form of tyranny and totalitarianism. Incidentally, you might want to throw a few statistics by you, and it's quite provable in a number of talks given recently, both by the United Nations and others. The United Nations is entrenched in our country. They're training our troops on. Our troops are being trained by the United Nations in the United States, and I think that's kind of an oddball system. Russian troops are being trained on basically Montana and North Dakota and the northern tier states, Washington, upstate Washington, etc. There's a stockpiling of Russian tanks and hardware by the U.S. Army. For what purpose? Also, we have purchased at the cost of some $38 billion all the Russian nerve gas. Nerve gas is, their nerve gas is extremely long shelf life. We're destroying our own nerve gas, which has a relatively short shelf life of 15 years, but the Russian variety is extremely deadly, and also tell you something else about that. The Russian nerve gas is composed primarily of glandular secretions, and they even mentioned that as they were downing flying saucers within their own country, they found a way of making chemical weapons from some of the alien cadavers and that kind of thing like that, from some of the glandular excretions. So once again, biological weapons against the people of the United States. There have been other talks given by other people alluring to this, including Ted Gunderson, who's an ex-FBI agent, who's got tired of the federal government tromping on him, and another ex-astronaut by the name of James Groden. Not the Groden of Alternative 3 book fame, but this is another Groden. A number of key government people have started coming out slowly, but unfortunately it's at a snail's pace. I'm the only one that ever worked and had a level 3 security clearance that came out from the cold, so to speak, and completely laid everything open to the American public, or any public. something like this was tried in Britain and in France, but the person got jailed. Incidentally, I can't be charged with espionage theoretically because, according to our, including one person who said, "Oh, this place doesn't exist." Well, it's on an aerial map, kind of different. If it doesn't exist, then I'm just full of you know what, hype and hooey, so to speak, and I'm just crazy or something like that, and so be it. And if it doesn't exist, it doesn't exist. And how can I be charged with a crime on something that doesn't exist? Another thing is that to be guilty of espionage, you have to sell for dollars or cents or some form of monetary gain the information that you impart. I'm not doing that in any way, shape, or form. A talk, a lecture isn't counted. It's actual exchange of money by another individual for the information, for the proscribed information. Well, I'm going to be getting out a few alien artifacts here and let you take a look, and you're welcome to kind of stretch your legs a little bit and feet. Clear off some of these things here so you can see them. Talking about, if you look at very carefully, and I'll leave my hand lens out for you to take a peek. By the way, when you use this hand lens, you want to get right up on the object like this. See a line going straight through with the wood layers, the cambium coming this way as whatever went through it, burnt through it. It's very interesting fossil. And there's another out-of-place artifact, or blue part, so to speak. This is another fossil. This is at one time a cave mushroom, a fossil plant. Something cut it absolutely perfectly, like a laser, cut right through the thing, and part of it slid off, and it later got perfectly petrified, similarly to the Hiroshima and Nagasaki atomic bomb test with a similar signature. Here's this petrified, instantly petrified garlic plant. Incidentally, this is 65 to 100 million years old. This is 105 to 130 million years old. And this is roughly 30 million years old. It has the exact chemical makeup and structure of quartz crystals formed on its surface and on the internal structure of the plant itself, which the top part, of course, the sprout is all broken off. This is the sprout underneath it. And the quartz crystals are identical to material found at Hiroshima and Nagasaki after the three drops bomb. Here's a bottle of the RAM coating of the black jets. Of course, when they come in after their mission, they're glowing red hot, and they drip this particular material off on this in-coat tarmac. This isn't tar, it's a special cement, and it just drips. And maybe some of these aircraft, you might see drip spots like here and here and there and different places. So this is the material, it's like lava that drops off of it. It also contains certain alien elements, or alien reproduced elements. Here's a piece of fossil coral from Jordan, having a small particular non-fossil. It isn't a crinoid. It might be, some of you might know what a crinoid fossil is. It's kind of like an underwater lily or plant, seawater lily, but this isn't it. This is actual machined out part similar to a rotor fan, a miniature rotor fan. There's a small engine right there. This is element 123, which is also in topoline. topaline and element 123. They're very much heavier than uranium. They're island of stability elements. They're, by the way, these pieces of metal I've purchased with my own money when I worked for the government. As if they were test samples, they never bothered to pick them back up, nor did they pay me back for them, so they're my property. But it's a golden orange metal. The pure metal is pure golden orange, and like lead, you can just carve it. It's a very peculiar metal indeed. Totally stable, cannot be isotoped. Element 123 with an atomic weight of about 320, and here it is. It's almost twice the weight of uranium.
Where did that come from, Phil?
That was formed down at Dulce, New Mexico, and also there were scrap heaps and scrap piles of it in and around Tonopah Test Range, which is right here. Tonopah Test Range is actually above Groom Lake.
Is that metal from our soil? Is it metal from our soil?
No, this is an alien. This is two alien elements. And here, if I might show you,
Minus the brick labs, minus the brick labs, not underneath.
I thought I had some. Yeah, here we go. This periodic chart was developed by a number of scientists anonymously. Don't want their name revealed. Of course, all we're familiar with is element 103. That's been around for a long time. And a couple of these were made in Russia. These that don't have any name, they're very short-lived indeed. Element 109 to 110 also. But after, from 111 to 140, these are all elements that were garnered off of alien attack vehicles or alien spaceships or flying saucers when they were taken apart. Now, topaline is here, element 117, and element 123 is murnite. It's a combination of both those. An extremely hard substance capable of withstanding temperatures in excess of 9,500 degrees Fahrenheit to as much as 14,000 degrees Fahrenheit. This piece of material is it's a kind of in a fleur-de-lis pattern. This kind of material is lighter than lithium. Of course, lithium is number 3. Might want to point out it's number 3 on the scale. It's a terrestrial element, but this is somewhere between 2 and 3. Between helium and lithium, it also is an alien element. It's what they call a mixture, an admixture element. It's extremely light, and it's used in the airframes of all black jets and F-117A, B-2, and B-1, B-2, and B-30, or the Aurora series. And it comes in a scalenohedrocrystalline form, which is alien. It's kind of a dead giveaway. Here's a tabular scalenohedrocrystalline form, 4 times the hardness of a diamond, 4 times the tensile strength, capable of withstanding temperatures in excess of 45,000 degrees Fahrenheit before chemical breakdown. It is used in the window the small slit windows. They're in the underbellies and the blackened out windows of the actual cockpit, although most of these pilots fly blind. They don't ever see anything from the ground. So this kind of that's also an alien material, and it is element, if I remember right, it's element 113. Here's another alien element formed in the confines of outer space. You might ask, what are we space shuttling? With all our shuttle missions, of course, we're being lied to every time they talk or open their lips, open their mouth. The same crystalline structure is here as well as it is here. This material is the hardness of a diamond. It's also used in the rotor and propeller shafts of propellered aircraft or rotored aircraft. It's also used in high-speed drills and other kinds of things like that, which are used to make holes in metals that cannot be touched with a welding torch. And this, of course, is that hunk of metal. And I have a real treat here. When I was 14 years old, I was with my father, who was talking to us, Sir Johnny Rawlins. It's Johnny H. Rawlins, who was a British naval sea lord, and he had collected some of the crash retrieval objects of the infamous Roswell crash, and these are actually little bits of the skin that have. And of course, you remember the skin, you couldn't bend it or cut it or anything. The way they did this, of course, they dropped liquid nitrogen on it, and they used a hammer technique of shattering it, and it became brittle. But once again, it's composed of nothing but alien elements, which are, by the way, we're not able to understand where this particular elements come from in the skin. It's the thickness of the sheets of paper you're writing on, and that's all that's needed to be meteor-proof and missile-proof and everything else. And these things have crashed, of course, and they've also been shot down by luck, predominantly not by skill. And I'll let you look at that. You can handle these other things, but don't handle this.
You say they've been shot down, Phil. How would they have done that? With a
Charged
projectile?
Charged particle beam weapon, as well as a railgun. Reusable railgun. And
That works so like the shotgun, you spray it out.
no, not really. A railgun is an electronic gun that shoots a projectile about 25,000 miles an hour, much faster than any rifle. I'll have a question and answer period. You can come up, take a look at these artifacts. Here's a couple of magazines. The Spotlight. Anyway, here's the Alien Digest that got my friend killed. Here's some of my father's notes. Those are blanks there, but there's the famous popular science about secret airbase. By the way, if it doesn't exist, how come they printed it? Here's the Nazi saucer. That was done by Vladimir Cherzhirsky, who was a Russian space engineer of some fame. Here's the new periodic chart of the elements. And you can go ahead and look through it. Incidentally, here is a unique piece of hardware too. It's an ordinary gold watch. The only thing unique about this particular gold watch is that it's a Waltham, but on the back, on the reverse, it's made in Montauk, New York. It just happened to be used by my dad in the Philadelphia experiment. And it happens to be keeping a rather accurate time. Anyway, I need a seat, and I'll let you look.
Can we get one of those periodic types?
Actually, the heaviest is the Mernite, that kind of gold-looking material. Be very gentle with these. These aren't normal specimens. And one person handling one piece at a time.
Can we get a periodic chart like that? Do some of those?
Yes, I do. These are $4 a piece.
Okay, I'll take one.
And a year ago, these were secret. Above top secret. By the way, here's your. Okay. Thank you very much. Let's see what this is here for you. After we take a look, and ask you to take your seat, and we'll have a question and answer period, and then I'll wrap it up. Okay. The aerial maps are $2 if you want one of those. Those are actual aerial maps. used at Groom Lake, and those were made in 1966. Also have portfolios of selected pictures of the atomic bomb blasts in Bikini, as well as Del Thor. And if there's some of them that need labeling, I'll label them for you after the talk.
Do you have one like that?
Yes, I do. Matter of fact, this I can't sell. Take a look inside of that canyon, so to speak. You get an interesting formation. See how the wood fibers have just literally been separated. Yeah, that's right. Of course, you've heard about straws and going through telephone poles after a tornado. Well, maybe this was that kind of a thing, although it seems to be remote.
Are those $20?
Yeah, these are $20, and they're a select group.
Is this in there too?
Well, I'll tell you what, I'll just throw this in. How about that? There's a select group of pictures, like here at the street saucers leaving ground zero. I have other ones that are marked with USS Eldridge. This is, by the way, is the USS Eldridge ready room. It's a ready room aboard the USS Eldridge. I think LB will verify that. And that's one of their, I think, how many ready rooms? Is Al here?
Yeah,
how many
I'm here.
ready rooms were aboard the USS Eldridge?
Theoretically, two. I only knew of one because that's the only one I ever went in.
Okay.
The lecturing varied between various lectures.
It lists the people, there's different people, not all the people, although you can do your homework and probably find that out. These are going, after this talk, these placards are going to be duplicated on special paper and sent to the United States Senate, and of which these pictures will not only be totally declassified, but will be out in public domain.
You're taking a picture of those. You're taking a picture of all of them.
And if anything's not marked, if I haven't marked, I'll try and identify them for you.
That's not good. Could you?
I could give you a map of Groom Lake also.
Could you?
Sure, I'll be. Pen doesn't work. All traffic.
Yeah, what a difference. This is the heaviest one?
Yeah.
It's the hardest one?
What's you say, the 300 feet?
That's not the only thing I've purchased here from there.
Where are you?
So from here I give a couple more talks. I am uprooting myself. I'm probably going to live in Idaho.
Go through a boat.
No, I don't think so. No, don't get along. And I kind of like the guy actually.
This is the stuff that's good for the stuff?
Yep, it is.
And what is that called for?
It's called RAM. I call them the fellow who sent them to me, the Aurora drops. Sent to me by the base commander over there. Because I did enough work on this. I helped do a lot of Navy aerospace applications. Anyway, radar absorbent material.
Friday.
Incidentally, you can take your portfolios and copy the actual Joint Army-Navy Task Force language under those photographs, and that's the official language. I've stuck my own word in. Yes, well, I don't have all of them, but there's a select group. You can look through it and see the different ones that are selected.
You know, that's 2 years ago, you said?
Yeah. You got A-bomb disease, A-class disease. Some of your careers, atomic war veterans. Atomic era veterans. Pardon me, but I'm going to take a seat. My back and my chest still hurt.
You want us to wait to ask questions?
No, actually, we'll continue to look. We'll let these people write down the names of the. We'll start the Q&A here in about 10 minutes, 5 minutes, if you don't mind.
Okay.
Will you leave those out? I don't want them to video.
I think you'll have to sign up for the video, and you may have to.
I said I don't want to be in the video, but I want to see them.
Oh, okay. Did you hear the lady? She doesn't want to be in the video, but she'd like to look at those.
Go ahead.
So when she's up here, will you shut your camera off?
I don't,
Which one is this? Right there. So, I mean, which event is this?
Right here, this one. Flying disc, living ground zero, Joint Army, Navy Task Force 1 photograph, whatever you suppose you want. This was the Bikini Island. Oh, Bikini Island.
this was one.
Roswell.
What date is it? 47?
Yeah. July 1947. Piece of paper, and so I'm signing it. Walking away. And when I walked away, 29 other engineers walked away. We walked away in a group. We submitted our papers to the U.S. Supreme Court immediately through the Circuit Court of Appeals in San Francisco.
Withdrawing from the job.
Department of Justice.
Have they had problems like you?
Oh, yes. Quite a few people come out. There's another thing I might want to mention very briefly. How about cold fusion? Suppose that Nobel laureate physicist, of course, that was very quickly quashed because if cold fusion became a reality, we could make our own electricity in our kitchen. And make car batteries for our cars that would last forever and other kinds of things like that. Cold fusion, this is the chemical formula for the metal oxide used in cold fusion, which is very similar to the metal oxides in alien elements, used in airframes of black chips.
Bill?
What?
Does the average engineer in this country not understand the thing about the bomb not being possible?
I haven't talked to a single engineer. I've probably talked to 400 of them so far, and everyone knows the federal government is involved up to their eyeballs.
How about school teachers, scientists, a degree?
School teachers, I've talked to too many of them. They still believe it was a fertilizer bomb.
Most school teachers don't think.
Most school teachers, you're right, do not think. Higher education is a joke. Most need this anymore here?
Was that the bonds and these are the cold fusion?
Yeah.
And your point was that it was valid with the.
It was very valid. It was proven. People he donated the award to Greenpeace at the end of it all. I'm not a proponent of them, and I guess they do pretty good work. Anyway, the award was $140,000 and for their discovery, and the U.S. military said, no, you can't do this. Now they're working with Cold Fusion in Japan. The information is forbidden to be told the public of the United States. Once again, we're treated as babies and children by our federal government structure and told that and lied to and saying that this is a bunch of hyperbole. I'll tell you folks, if we don't do some serious changing and talking in groups, maybe in small groups like I'm doing, but maybe not coming, have to come clean and come out of the woodwork, so to speak. But you have to talk in groups of what you learn. And if you do this, word of mouth is a wonderful thing. And from that, we might be able to continue and have our freedoms that we so aptly take for granted in these wonderful United States. And I've been in over 70 countries. I've never found another country as beautiful as the United States.
Well, Einstein, shortly after the first bombs went off, said that
Now we're going to have the question and answer period. And
when it came to nuclear, you can find all this other. It's got to be discussed every village squares. That was 50 years ago.
question and answers, folks. You got them? Let's hear them.
I was reading in that underground book, that I purchased a couple of days ago.
Richard Sauter book.
Yeah, and he was talking about, I've been interested in the underground railroad system ever since I heard Mel Bailey talk about it about 3 years ago.
I helped build the tunnel.
But in the book, they don't tell anything about the newer drills that build the tunnels.
There are no drills.
There's no drills.
No drills.
It's a nuclear boring machine.
It's a nuclear boring
It
machine
melts its way through the
that
rock.
literally melts or deflagrates the rock and to an extremely fine powder, melts it, and sticks it on the walls.
But he said in the book that he didn't know if they had ever went ahead and made that machine.
Well, the machine's existing, but I can tell you even who Krupp of West Germany made the machine.
He had no pictures of the later of that machine. What he had was more of the obsolete machines.
Even obsolete equipment can drill up to 7 miles a day. And we've been lied to when they say a quarter of a mile a day.
Even through solid rock.
Even through solid rock. Yes, sir.
7 miles a day.
Even if they have to take the material out and haul it away.
There's nothing to take out.
Here's nothing to take out to speak of. It's all vaporized. Here's another piece of titanium metal mixed with alien elements. Very hard material. Doesn't break. And it's used in all of the black jets, stealth aircraft.
Why was the big mercury mines that were found by Las Vegas, why were they confiscated?
They run very deep, for one thing. They were used for everything from atomic waste disposal to putting bad news aliens and making a little jail out of it, I guess, if you wanted to call it that. It's a good way of, once again, hiding the problem from the public.
So it's tied into the underground system where the mines were?
Absolutely.
Where were they by? They were outside of Las Vegas, I've heard.
They're over near Mercury, Nevada.
You were talking about 129 of the underground bases and about half of them being used to house the aliens. What are the other half used for?
The other half are used strategically by different military organizations, mostly Army and Air Force and Navy for research and development laboratories predominantly, and also medical research and development laboratories and chemical weapon laboratories. And once again, these bases have been built unceasingly day and night since 1940. And if you add up all the bases, all the cost of all the bases, it's pretty close to $2 quadrillion.
How can they keep this so the public so uninformed,
Well, it's pretty
especially
easy.
the people that live around the areas?
It's pretty easy to keep it away from the public. They've done a real good job of it, with the exception of people like myself that come out of the woodwork, so to speak. The public believes the lie, the big lie. Of course, you know the old adage about lies is you have to keep telling them to keep, and then you get to a point in time where you believe them to such a degree that you become part of the lie. You live the lie.
Is this where they do their cloning?
Supposedly, a lot of these things are horrific beyond degree. Traumatic events that I went through caused me to get professionally taken care of at Bethesda Naval Hospital, among other places. And that gave me something like battle stress or delayed stress syndrome. I learned to slowly work my way out of that. It was not easy.
What's going on in Weld County, Colorado with them having a lot of changes and also having the most cattle mutilations in the whole world?
Cattle mutilations are government-sponsored alien operations and have been since they were first started in 1967. Actually, they were probably going on much earlier. And the upshot of that was we allow the aliens to extract glandular secretions from animals, mixing them with their own. In exchange, we'll give them plutonium products for their drive, for their spaceship drives, among making alien elements for them, and they give us the biological weapons. Isn't that a nice, horrible scenario? So this kind of stuff is bad news indeed. By the way, being a U.S. citizen in good standing, I can't stand it anymore. I think we can do better. And if our government officials will not keep, in other words, if they keep telling us the big lie, keep reporting the big lie, I think it's time we not only vote them out, we demand them out. We impeach them out. And if we can't do that, I advocate just what our founding fathers say. Federal government structure out of control is totalitarian slavery. And we must vigorously fight them out. And of course, the trouble is with revolutions, folks, they always end up killing their own people. And I don't advocate the overthrow of my government. But right now, my government is not in touch with me, or you, or anybody else. And just kind of mood after that.
What again was the number of estimated alien downed craft?
Pretty close to 800,000 all total. As we speak, the Russians are shooting down 2 a day per province within motherland Russia. The Southern Hemisphere, 6 per day. The United States, 1 per day. And Europe, 1 per day. It's a full-scale invasion. Just because you don't see them over the White House. By the way, you wonder why don't they, well, Billy Meyer sees them, different. But first of all, of the 11 groups of aliens there are, 4 of which are benevolent, 7 of which are very evil.
Can you expound on the ones that are good, that are benevolent?
Well, the ones purported by Billy Meyer, the Pleiadians, Pleiadians, from the 7-star cluster, the Pleiades. That's one of the groups. There's another group from the other side of Orion, another group from about 3,500 light years out, supposedly still with us. I don't remember their name offhand, but they're a very small individual, human-looking but childlike, but very large cranium, very large heads. IQ is off the scale, and they can do no wrong. They're of the angelic type. They don't fly around with little wings or anything. By angelic, I mean that they can't do wrong. They physically can't do wrong.
Inspired Spielberg and
They weigh about 30 pounds.
E.T. movie. Inspired.
About the fourth one?
Well, the fourth one is really 2 groups, and they're extremely tall individuals. They're predominantly ocean, deep ocean. They live in deep oceans, and they basically harvest our minerals, and then they're kind of considered always in oceans of below 20,000 feet. They're these 2-tiered antennas found, and of course our submarines have found them years and years ago. During World War II, some submarine warfare and encountered several at very shallow depth. They didn't know whose weapon or whatever they were.
Are the aliens our biggest threat, or is our federal government the biggest threat?
Both are our major threat at the present time. It's bad enough we have one, well, let alone 2.
Does Will County, Colorado have an underground base in that area?
Colorado has 3 underground bases, one at DIA. I believe what you mentioned, what was it, Weld?
Weld County is the biggest, one of the biggest counties in the United States.
I believe it's in the northeastern section of that county, if I remember it. I'd have to look at a map. I can identify every base on a map. I have the latitudes and longitudes of such bases. And by the way, if I mention that does entail espionage. If I mention all of them, and I cannot do that to the crowd, and I want to keep on talking as much as I can. So that's one thing I promised to do, but I have to break my promise, and I'll tell you that I was wrong in admitting that.
I encountered something when I was back east. I visited friends up there.
You'll have to speak. Otherwise,
I visited Minnesota. I was coming back and I decided to take a different route to get off of the interstates and take US Highway 36 across northern Kansas. And about 20 miles from the Colorado border, there was suddenly construction. 36 was completely cut off. And the detours went way around, and I didn't do that. I just went down and I set it over that area. About, I guess, 15 minutes later, I saw strange formation clouds in perfect crystals. And I was convinced there's something very active. And it usually cut off the U.S. highways.
the name of those clouds is, if I can interrupt, is altocumulus lenticulatus, or lens-shaped clouds. Almost always predominantly, there are 2 kinds of clouds. The kind, if you go up to Virginia City sometime in April or May, you'll see these clouds that come right up, roaring up to a steep mountain. You'll look at them and they'll just disappear. They'll cease to go over your shoulder. It's nothing. It's kind of that's altocumulus lenticulatus A, and the B kind, it almost looks as like a black thunderstorm-like cloud, and they always have metallic discs in the center. And if you take your camera, your eye won't probably see them. The camera will pick up metallic dots within that cloud structure, and those dots can be professionally analyzed, and you come up with the conclusion of the Earth-flying disk.
hardly ever see those clouds more than 20, 30 miles from mountains. The high at that point was at least 200 air miles, straight line distance from Long's Peak. There's the big mountain cloud.
I had spotted such near Portland, Oregon, and took pictures, submitting it to a TV radio station and TV and radio station. It never got on the air. I wonder why. But they're rare clouds. If you ever have a chance to take a picture of them, you should.
What causes the clouds?
Well, the natural formation, of course, is altocumulus. They're extremely high cumulus cloud formation. Of course, cumulus is a building, it's a big, kind of like a thunderhead or a thundercloud. It's air currents rushing up, and of course, with the altocumulus lens-shaped or cookie-shaped clouds, you have air currents rushing up. Air currents rushing up and air currents rushing down, and what they do is they compress the clouds, and then there's air circulation, generally in a clockwise or counterclockwise measure. I studied weather when I was in high school. That was one of our curriculums.
But you've got it right there. It's a man-made one of sorts.
Well, yeah, I mean, the A-bomb is the A-bomb cloud is a lenticulatus.
We're downing one a day in this country. Wouldn't it seem logical that there would be more people that would be aware of debris?
No, I'll tell you why. As soon as one is downed, they're attacking certain northern tier state Air Force bases, predominantly. If you can get on those bases or stray onto those Air Force bases without getting arrested, good luck. But if one of those craft is down, they seal off the whole area, period. They being the federal government, police and whatnot, Air Force police or whatever, air base or army base or tank base or whatever you got in that area, they seal off the whole area. Anybody caught in there is shot on sight or immediately arrested and detained. By the way, a military base can circumvent the U.S. Constitution and Bill of Rights. An Indian reservation can do the same thing. Is this what our government, this was supposed to have been laid out by our founding fathers? I don't believe so. I think we can do better. I know we can do better. I also know that our present government's stature is so punitive, it's very reminiscent of early Nazi days with Adolf Hitler. In fact, New World Order was taken from his manifesto, so to speak, in 1933. He actually said, "We will form a new world order."
Where was the third one in Colorado? You said one was DIA, the second one was the northeastern part of Weld County.
One is down, I believe, you know where Telluride, Colorado is?
Yeah.
Okay, it's due east of Telluride by about 13 or 14 miles. And you can't miss it because if you take some of the side roads, you'll see vented air shafts coming right out of the rock. That's typical of an underground base. Or if you're traveling along by car, by jet, you'll see a truncated mountain. Remember the truncated mountain? You saw as we were curving around going to Las Vegas, and the plane was banking like this. And I said, "Hey, Al, look at the deep underground military base." And the cockpit door was open. It says, "Oh, God." And what they did is they did this and worked around, and just as you got your camera out.
Right.
I already had a picture of it. And that was, by the way, one of the bases at S4, because it had circled around Area 51, that was one of the bases. So I actually saw it from the air instead of never, from about 30,000.
How deep are they?
They can run, the deepest deep underground military base is 2.5 miles underground. The Dulce base is 2.5 miles underground. That's pretty close to 13,000 feet. 5,280 feet make a mile.
You don't have any temperature or high temperature problems, do you?
No, as a matter of fact, in certain sandstones, you actually get a lower temperature than ground surface.
Your water leaking?
Water leaches out. Of course, that has to be sealed, protective sealant, very difficult in some cases. By the way, this ring I'm wearing has a sapphire. When you blow mountains apart, there's sapphires in mountains. I had that professionally cut. Where it kind of is a good luck piece. It's a blonde 6-ray star sapphire, American star sapphire.
It's been working.
Yes.
You might add.
I had it cut and polished and the setting made in Las Vegas. Some of my different days. Yeah.
Well, what about when you're just driving along and there seems to be nothing around, and you'll see these white pipes coming out of the ground with turbines on the top?
Exactly.
Is that one?
That's one type.
There's one of those
It's
in
an air shaft.
Denver. I mean, I've seen them along the highways in Denver. It's like industrial or commercial stuff over here, and then all of a sudden you see all these white tubings along the highway.
Those are air shafts, or some of them are run very deep, some of them are run only 400 or 500 feet underground.
You know, you don't have to be a military tactician to see that's very vulnerable. You can plug those things up and pump some bad gas down there while it happens.
Well, I guess I'm not a tactician and such, so
Yeah.
that's kind of moved. Yeah, that's one way of telling. Yes, sir.
Are there any of those underground bases in Nebraska or Kansas?
In every state, there's at least 2.
You know where they are in Nebraska?
I'd have to look on a map. I couldn't tell you.
Probably office,
Beg pardon?
probably office, Air Force Base.
Yeah, probably often. Pretty good. That's also where they took some of the alien remains and saucer remains right off the bat, off of Air Force. Okay, any more questions? One more question.
Do they have an underground base up by Sedona, Arizona?
Yes, sir. Yes, we do, and it's a very deep base indeed. In fact, they're going to make it deeper than any other base. They want to take it 4 miles now.
What's it called again?
Sedona, Arizona.
Is that one that's just
A
north?
lot of the, beg pardon?
Just northeast of there, or northwest?
Yes, just northwest. Well, that's all, folks, and I think I better leave some time for Al Bailey. And I better munch a sandwich before I become an alien. Anyway,
Thank you.
it's been a real pleasure. And I hope you've had some hand-on experience. By the way, there's some little metallic fragments you might be able to pick up. I don't know, they might be alien. Thanks.
Thank you.